Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tipsy Testing. This is Inflectra's virtual happy hour where we talk about software testing, test automation, project management, agile development, and life in general. My name is Taya, and I am head of business development here at Inflectra, and I will be moderating today's conversation. Before long, I would like to give everyone a fair warning. We are going to be featuring some beverages, alcoholic beverages, so beware. And we will be talking about technology, software, and probably having some jokes, hopefully. Now, let me introduce our esteemed speakers. Going alphabetically, I will start with Adam Sandman. Adam is the Director of Technology here at Inflectra. He has about 20 years of IT work experience, and he is variously done software architecture, test automation, software testing, project management, etc., etc. Adam has prepared a fun fact about himself.
So
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, when I was, must have been about 8 years old, computers were still fairly new then. This is the early 80s. And my parents refused to buy me a computer because they said, well, that's a waste of energy. You're never going to need to use a computer in real life. I mean, how will it ever get you a job? Of course, that was 1981, and the world looks quite different now. So at the time, I was like, okay, that's a challenge. So I used to go to the local store and I actually use the computers, like the equivalent of Best Buy in Britain. It's called Dixon's. And you'd actually use the computer while my mother was shopping for clothes. I would type there. I went home and then made a paper computer out of just pieces of paper and drew the keyboard with the QWERTY and everything. And my parents were like, I think we better get him a keyboard. I better get him a computer because he's going to build on a paper. And then when I was about 3 or 4 years old, I wrote a game of Risk on the computer, and the rest is history. I've been programming since the age of basically 8, but that moment began it all.
Yeah, I don't like Risk because I cannot win.
I
can win any game. I cannot
play anymore. I can't play anymore. Sorry. No, I had spent 2 years trying to design algorithms in this stupid game to make it work, and I was 8. It's like, oh god, yeah. So no more Risk.
Traumatized. Okay, now on to our next speaker. Our esteemed speaker today is Mike Lyles. He probably does not need introduction, but let me just recap. Mike is also over 20 years of software testing, project management, agile management professional. He is a world famous keynote speaker. We have met Mike in many a conference all over the world, including Germany the last time. And he also is an author. He has a motivational book called, let me, if I can, Drive-Through is Not Always Faster. That's the name. Okay, right. Before we start talking about the book, because I think some people may want to hear about your book, I would like for you to tell us a fun fact about yourself.
Yeah, other than playing for 50 weddings, I got into piano when I was 7 years old and said that's what I'm going to do. I always tell people the weirdest fun fact about me is I can say my ABCs backwards really fast. I was sitting in the very early years of school and there was a train that had the ABCs. I read it backwards and I learned it backwards. I can do it forwards, of course, if I sing the song, but I can do it backwards really fast as well. So it's a weird trait and something I share with people whenever they say, what's something interesting about it? So
very, very cool. And super. All right.
Can we get a rendition?
Yes.
Oh yes, please.
Okay, here we go.
Demo.
ZYXWVUSU. ZYBWX. Let me try again. ZYXWVUTSRQPONMLKJIHGFADCBA.
Nobody can follow you or criticize you for that. Right. That's awesome.
Say whatever you like.
Yes.
Exactly. Pretty much.
Ted, can you do the Russian? Can you do the Russian one forwards?
Oh, I can do Georgian.
Can you do it?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anban Gandon and Vincentan in Galas Manar of Ajan Jan San John Ho. Hi.
Woo!
Yeah, we have 33 and very, very difficult consonants as well. So there we go. Now, let's focus on the questions. We have about 7 questions that we received from our community, our Twitter community. Shout out to them. First off, I wanted to ask you guys, how is everybody doing? And most importantly, since this is Tipsy Testing, what is everybody drinking?
Okay.
Me first, I guess, in alphabetical order. I have a gin and tonic today, and it is a Scottish gin called the Botanist that I first had in London last year. And I'm marrying it with a elderflower infused tonic called by Fever Tree, and then 2 limes, not squeezed, in the glass.
Shaken, not stirred.
Yes. Well, mine is not alcoholic, but it is a Starbucks double shot espresso. It does the opposite of alcohol. If I take this, I stay awake all night long, and if I take 2 of them, I stay awake for several days. So
yes, let's not do 2.
Yeah.
1 is enough. And by the way, it is Mike's mom's birthday. Happy birthday to your mom.
Yes. We had a quarantine birthday today. She came prepared for the fun time and wore a mask and had Lysol and hand sanitizer and everything.
Yes.
And we took pictures. She looks like she's full quarantined in her pictures. So she enjoys a good time. Very funny, sweet person.
That's fantastic. All right. Now on to the questions. Let's see. So we have people from all over the world sending their questions. And first off is Varsha from New Zealand, who has a comment. And it goes like this. Testing community believes that automated checking is a skill and can replace testing skills or testing without tools. Any comments that you guys care to comment on that, or any thoughts about that?
Yes, I would say, there's been a lot of discussions about automated checking versus testing, a lot of discussions about, is it testing, is it checking? I think we get wrapped around the axle a lot on that, and we get so caught up into that, we forget what we're trying to accomplish there. And really the fact is, and I've heard a lot of people, Angie Jones and others, say this, testing, automation in testing is no longer an option. It's required. You have to do it. If your company's not doing it, then you should be. Not a question of should I automate or not. It's when and where should I automate. And there's a lot of talks about it. I think, when you look at what I feel on automation is really, at the end of the day, you have to have a human brain that's thinking about some of the things that happen. Because there's things that I test, that I've tested before, that I feel like it's a feeling more than it's seeing something. It's more than what you can see. And so if you're looking at something, this doesn't feel right. This application is not performing right. And you can make AI do many things. You can make machine learning do many things. But as far as being able to that feeling, I think it takes a human brain to do that and to build that up. So that's what I would say.
So 2 comments, and I think one of them is interesting, is that we're thinking about human computer interface, or HCI. We're building software for humans mostly, and in those cases you need a human to be involved in the process, but you may also increasingly have software that's built primarily for computers. So it could be an API that you're testing, or it could be a bot or some computer-based device that's being interacted with by another computer. In that case, you could potentially be 100% automated because the end user is not a human. But in the cases where the end user is a human, I think you're always going to need to have a human person be involved in it, because oftentimes when we're building the tests, we as humans are writing the automated tests, so we're limited by our capabilities for understanding what could be the outcomes. For example, today we had a new build of our software, which is timely, and all the unit tests passed. We spent a lot of time doing all these unit tests, all these calculations, and one of our testers today managed to do something crazy where she cut and paste something. Elise, it's a shout out for you. She cut and paste something inside of itself, and it's a hierarchy, and it started infinitely recursing, and what should have been 78 new requirements became 4,000 new requirements, and they're still growing until we turn off the system. So and we know how did you do that? We don't even know how she did that. But the fact is that we've always automated tests, and the limits of our imagination, I think, constrain what we could do. And even despite that, having someone come in as a human and do something that's out of the box in 2 minutes broke and blew all that away. So I think you have to have automation because cycle times are faster, but that isn't the end of the story unless your end user is a computer.
Yeah, and I would add to that that if you're in a position where you feel like that automation is going to become highly used in your organization, you really need to make sure that you're learning those skills. Don't let it get ahead of you. I've been out of development, hands-on development for years. And if you put me back into a development, scenario right now with the new development languages that are out there, I would struggle. So it's really about keeping yourself relevant, whether you do it at work or you do it after work or after hours or whatever. It's good to learn those things and stay up to date.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Now let's move on to our second question. I'm having a hard time reading this word, but Shubhodaya from Calcutta is asking for a tip on role transition. She says she's transitioning from being an individual contributor on a team to a team lead, and she's asking you guys if you have any advice how she could proceed without antagonizing her team.
Okay.
All right.
Me first?
Sure.
Sure. I mean, in general, if you're an individual a person moving up to a role where you're perhaps on the same team or on a different team, it's a little bit different. If you were previously a member of the team and now you're the team lead, one of the challenges is going to be that people will always see you in the previous role or the previous hat you had, and so I think one thing you can always do is not show that even though you've been elevated maybe to a higher level of responsibility, you're still the same person and you're not above the work that they were doing. So demonstrating and making a point of demonstrating that any grunt work that comes along, you're not going to force on the team, that you will do it as much as anyone else, I think really builds credibility. Someone's got to do documentation or something that no one really wants to do. Stepping up and doing that, showing that even though I'm now the leader of the team, doesn't mean I'm above the work that we're all doing, helps a lot. And if you're coming into a new team, one of the things I just found really helpful was walking around with a cup of coffee and asking what look like silly questions. You'll learn a lot. Just walk around, and obviously now with the current situation, maybe it's a virtual walk around, doing a Google Hangouts and just asking people, what's going on? What are you doing today? Ask simple, or even what would be considered silly questions. There's never a silly question. You'll find out so much just by asking people what they're doing and how you can help.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That makes sense.
And I really keying off of that point on that, if you're a peer with them and then you become a lead on the team or a leader in the team, that's really the bigger struggle than if you join a team as a lead and you've never been a peer. Because I do think there's a quote I was trying to remember, but this guy was talking about, as parents, when we have kids, people talk about my kid is my best friend, and we want kids to be our best friends. But if your kids see you as equal, then you're losing that authority. And when they see you as an authority figure, you're my parent, then you can have some leverage. And I think you have to establish that authority when you become a lead, and you have to quickly establish that. And you can't establish it, to Adam's point, with brute force. You can't just say, hey, I'm the lead. I mean, you can, but you're not going to get their respect. And key focus, if you're moving from a peer to a lead, is you really got to earn their respect. They have to see that you're fit for the job, especially if they wanted the job and you wanted the job and you got it. That's an even worse situation, because then they're like, well, I'm better than him or I'm better than her. So I think the biggest struggle there is helping to establish. And I think the way you do it is build that collaboration with the team, build that bond with them, and to Adam's point, being there whenever they need obstacles moved out of the way. Because as a lead and a leader, I think that's more important than the skills and what you do for the team. Is how do you help that team remove the roadblocks, and help them accomplish what they need to get done.
Have you ever had that, Mike? In that situation where you've had to come into a team that you previously were a member of the team before? And
oh yes, yeah. So when I was a developer, I moved into a lead role many years ago, and I had then had people working for me, and I actually moved from a lead to a manager, and it was even more focused there, because moving from a lead to a manager, you've got other leads who are leaders who are, as I'm moving into a management role, you've got people who are my peers saying, okay, now he's my boss, how do we handle that? And I found that you really had to focus on working closely with them, and you figure out what is that one thing that's important to them, because you find out the one thing that motivates people. Everybody's motivated differently. When I became a manager, I bought a book called How to Become CEO for 13 people. And one of the people on my team said, you're not going to motivate me with a book. Some people are motivated by praise in public in the team. Some people hate that. Some people are motivated by money. Most of us are. Some people are motivated by position and title and opportunities. And so you have to figure out what motivates them and let them know you're there for them. And once you've done that once or twice and you continue to build on that, then you can build that bond between them, and then you don't have to worry about them not respecting what you do. But until you gain that respect, yeah, it's a tough road.
Right.
Indeed. I would like to move this along because we have a time limit. And now there's a question from Tristan from Los Angeles. And the question is for Mike. Can you share a bit more about your writing process for your book and the one key message that you hope readers would learn from it?
Yeah, so I started the book in 2002. A lot of people go, wow, you've been writing the book for 17 years before you published it. But, I tell a lot of folks that if I go to my drawer here in my office and I pull out this journal that I had in 2002, the first thing I wrote is I'm going to write a book. I don't know when. But a lot of people struggle with that. And a lot of people have asked me, hey, I'd want to write a book someday, but I have no idea where to start. And I didn't either. And what I just started doing was putting together notes and putting together ideas. And once I got into it, I realized I don't want the book to be a front to back, read every chapter, 30 chapters in a row, and you're done. I wanted 30 short stories. So I thought, what's the titles? So for many years, I'd just come up, I'd be in the road and I'd say, that's a great one. I'd come home and I'd write the title down. Had no story with it yet. I just had the title. And so when I completed that around 2015, I said, okay, it's time to start compiling these. I had about 45 titles, condensed it to 30, went through some extensive editing, ended up reading that book probably 15 times, which I've read it so many times I've almost memorized it. But then the process, when you talk about process, really the big thing there is writing the book and editing was really tough. But to me, the marketing of the book afterwards is extremely and how do you get it out there and get people to be interested in it and hear about it? I'm just waiting for that one YouTuber that has 1 million followers to say, hey, this is a great book. And then, 100,000 people buy it, but it's not happened yet. We're waiting.
Well, tell us the name of the book and where we can find it.
Yeah, so the book is called The Drive-Thru is Not Always Faster. In today's times, it is faster because it's the only way, thanks to the coronavirus.
Right.
So it's not helping my marketing of my book. But yeah, The Drive-Thru is Not Always Faster. 30 short stories. They're all really quick. You can read them in any order. A lot of people buy it and say, I'm going to read one story a day. And so it's a good monthly read. But most people will start reading it and really enjoy it and finish it really quick. It's a short book. You can get it anywhere online. You can actually go to my book site, which is thedrivethrubbook.com.
Okay.
And it'll give you all the sites there where you can order it, whether it's Amazon and Barnes and Noble, different bookstores local here. And then you can get it an ebook right now for 99 cents, which is a great deal.
Wow, steal.
It did very good in that when I bumped it down to 99 cents. I'm like, it's the time to do it. And then so it's selling. It's done really well. I find that doing the book signings and taking books with me to conferences and events has really started to help. And I'd done a couple, and I kind of got a lot of momentum. And then coronavirus hit, and all of my conferences, I'm now up to 4 that have been canceled so far this year that I'm not going to. So
yeah, I think we're up to 5 or 6 right now, Tay, right?
Yes, we have 6 that have been canceled, but we are still hoping, fingers crossed, that InflectraCon 2020 that we are putting together in October is still going to hold, and we are going to have a book signing and book reading because we know that some of our friends are in the book making business and we would like to help them out. And so Mike has agreed to be there as a speaker, and he's bringing his book. And so if the viewers want to, check out the website and then come participate and hear Mike speak, this would be a good opportunity for them. Okay, moving on.
Fantastic.
Yes. So now we have our friend Smita from India.
My good friend Smita.
And so her question is looking at the bigger picture and is as follows. What are the biggest challenges in software testing across industry that are still unsolved?
So I guess I'll go first on this one. The challenges, I think, in the industry, when we do a lot of work in the industries that have a lot of quality built into them. So in theory, we do a lot of work with aerospace and life sciences, and they're supposed to have quality built in from the gate. I mean, that's the whole point. A lot of the processes. The problem is because a lot of these industries have a lot of paperwork and bureaucracy that goes with them, people tend to think that if I follow all the process, the ISO 9001, and I follow all these other, and I get all this paperwork in place, I'm testing. So they disengage their brain and they basically let the bureaucracy, the paperwork, and all the processes mean that they think they've tested something, and it becomes a crutch. And I think the danger will be that they haven't actually tested it. They've just documented it. And if you look at some issues going on in the real world in the aviation space with things in the news that have not been tested as well as they should have been, maybe they followed all the rules they were told to follow. So they followed the letter of maybe the quality or the testing, but not the spirit. So the biggest challenge, I think, for that set of industries, at least the ones we often come across, will be you become FDA compliant, you follow all the processes and all the standards, but in the end, there's a huge amount of risk that in your heart is there, and you can't maybe articulate it. But testers should be unafraid that just because it doesn't follow the process, if you feel there's risk and issues that need to be addressed, there needs to be a venue and a method for addressing them. And we need to encourage people to look outside of the process, look outside of the box. Just because you've done the 10 steps of the process doesn't mean that you're done. Because I think that's the big danger, is that testing becomes a documentation exercise and it goes out the door, and at the first contact with real life, it fails. And that was always true in software before. A lot of testing was like reading paper scripts that someone had written down and just having a user do a UAT and go through them step by step. And we knew in the end that as soon as you went out into the live world, the system would break. Like, well, how does that square? So I think it's just in industries, it's taking that same lesson we've learned, and I think making other industries more, I think, appreciative of testing is not just crossing the, checking the I's, crossing the T's, but actually using your brain to find out where risk is.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I've seen through the years, and I do a talk called the paradigm shift of quality, or a paradigm shift of test and QA, and that is really testing. We've said it for years, but we've not necessarily pushed it until recently, and that is quality is not only our responsibility from the test team, it's the responsibility of everyone. And Jerry Weinberg always says quality means something to everybody, and you have to figure out what quality means to everybody. To the project manager or the product owner, it means delivering on time, delivering the dates. To the stakeholder, it means, do I get what I asked for? To the test team, it's, does everything work? And so you have to understand what quality means to everybody, and then making sure everybody, it's a team sport. It's everybody's involved. And then I know, Adam, you've got a talk. It's like ship left, ship right, get it right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that talk because I think it's really, ship left is no longer optional. It's no longer good to have. It's you got to have it. And you see test teams that are now involved in the early stages, thinking about testability, usability, looking at the interface and the design, whereas testers years ago didn't really focus as much on the design of things as much as they did the function, and functionality. So I think, that's a big change. And then really, we whether you're doing agile or not, everything's going to be faster paced. And a lot of times we talk agile and people say, well, we're agile now, so we don't need this and we don't need that. And I don't think that really is comparable. You still need to do the certain things. To Adam's point, you've got to explore, you've got to think outside the box. You don't follow 10 steps and say we're done with testing. You have to do more, and you have to think, well, I did these 10 things, or I did these 5 things. Now what else do I need to do? What does that make me think I need to do? Thinking, exploratory. And then the last here is, I've got a talk called Discussions Testers Should No Longer Be Having, because a lot of times still today, even with the changes we've seen, people will say, well, how did we miss this in test? It's in production. How do we miss this in test? And I'm saying, how did we miss it to begin with? How did we miss it in development? How do we miss it in design? And we have to change that thinking to where if it's in production and it's broken, it's not necessarily the test team's fault. Yeah, they were the last team to see it,
right?
But they may not, they may not be responsible for it being missed. We didn't break anything. We just found it broken. So.
Right.
And I think getting everybody in that mindset is a good thing.
That's a good question that Mike brings up. Why is it that testers always feel emotionally connected to things going wrong in production and develop? And I'm a developer, so I get that. I have developers, testers yell at me. It's like developers don't feel the pain, even though maybe they caused it or didn't cause it, and things just happen. But developers generally are not as emotionally, I think, they don't emotionally internalize when things go out the door that don't work the way testers do. So testers, I think, because they feel the pain of the clients more. I think developers are like, well, if they're feeling the pain, it must be their fault. Well, that's not true. They just maybe care more. But developers seem to not every developer. A lot of developers don't seem to care as much, and they do care. But
well, I think it's a human nature to be compassionate. Like if you're at a dinner with someone and they have some food on their face, sometimes you're like, do I tell them that it's on their face, or or do you kind of just do this, and then they're like, okay, I see. You have to figure out a kind way without saying, hey, you got something on.
Yeah.
And Michael Bolton, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, it's an emotional connection. It's like nobody likes to hear your baby is ugly. And if you're a developer and this is your baby and you built it. I have a slide where I talk about that in one of my talks, and it's got this really crazy looking baby that's generated, and it's a really ugly looking baby. And it's like nobody wants to hear your baby is ugly. And so I tell my team, and I've had a lot of discussions this week. It's our year end for our India team for QA, and a lot of discussions I'm having with my team are, you have to be really good at having that discussion with the developer, showing them where the problem is, how to recreate it, what I found, and how I caused this to happen. But you have to be really not cautious. You don't want to be cautious and not tell them to wipe their face, but you also don't want to say, hey, this is horrible. Your code is really horrible. You're bad. You have to figure out a constructive way to say, hey, I'm with you. I think we've got a problem here. Let's look at it together and let's work together. And I think it's a kinder, gentler way of telling them, hey, this doesn't look good, and helping them do it. I think. And it is, it's emotional connection, and you have to figure out how to tell that story without really irritating someone. Because once you've irritated them with you wrote horrible code, you kind of lost them, and the connection and the bond.
Yeah, well, one thing we've done that One thing we've done that helps is also having our developers and testers take turns doing tech support. I think really helps a lot because they're doing it. Oftentimes they're doing it together. So by having our developers and testers be part of the support team and help out really helps, because when you get a support ticket, the developers and testers both realize, oh, the customer's having a problem. And particularly for the developers, it's oftentimes the only time they'll see a client really dealing with an issue that is in the system. And they're like, oh, I understand now the implications of if something goes out that's bad, I'm having to go deal with this and give them some stuff to work around it or fix it. And I see the pain and the struggles and the fact they're dealing with their team and all the rest of it that they may not otherwise see. They might otherwise be insulated from it. So a simple thing would be have your testers and developers play support for a day. It's like, I remember McDonald's, they used to have a rule where every CEO or vice president or any executive had to work at a McDonald's restaurant outlet, at least was it a couple of days, didn't matter what your role was. You had to be a server for a couple of days. And I think it really, you had to appreciate the tip of the spear of your business. And I think in technology, your end users are the tip of your spear. They're the people dealing with what you've built. And if it sucks, the customer support people will be the brunt of it.
Yeah. You make a great point. If you've ever noticed, people that have worked in a restaurant behave differently when they eat in a restaurant and they don't get the service. You kind of have compassion for the waiters and the staff when you've been there and you've done it. I worked in a seafood restaurant growing up and through school, and I was like, when things aren't good, I'm like, let's be a little bit understanding, and the people that I've been with have been like, this is out of control. I want to talk to the manager,
Right.
And they blame the waiter. They don't blame the cook.
Yeah,
exactly. The cook is the developer and the waiter is the tester.
Exactly. It's funny. I've got the paradigm shift talk that I do. I actually have that scenario where we talk about the cooks are the developers, the manager, and the guy that stops by to say, how are things going, is the QA team. And that guy that comes by and says, how is everything, has done nothing, other than just asking you how are things. But by that time, you're so outraged that you're just going to unload on them, and they're the tester. You're exactly right.
Right, but also I can only speculate about this, but also if your title or your job function is to be quality assurance or quality control, you have vested interest. It is my job on the line. If there's something bad that goes out, if it ships and it has bugs. So I think we can all understand that people are, invested and they internalize their jobs. That's their domain. They are responsible. So, and buck stops with them before it's shipped. So I guess we could all empathize.
That's a great point. Smita always says QA needs to stand for quality assistance instead of quality assurance. and I've stolen that from her many times.
Mhm.
Because it's true, because if assurance is in her name, it's an expectation.
Yes, indeed. All right, moving along. Let's. I have a question from Marlon from Brazil, who asks, "What was your most remarkable challenge when we talk about test data?" Challenge when we talk about test data. Somebody has a book already talked about matrix.
Test
metrics.
data.
Yeah.
Biggest challenge with test data is always getting good test data that's anonymized and is not going to result in leaking out people's private information. And actually, test data has become a problem because in the old days, you would just get your production data and kind of stick it in the system and hope no one noticed, and then it would leak out sometimes. But now with GDPR and some of the things going on, thankfully, in the rest of the world of HIPAA, you can't do that. So there are tools that make that easier. I think the one challenge we did have once is we hooked up an email system and we had all our test data, it was real data with real email addresses, and it all started sending out to all of our real customers. And that was bad. So making sure if you're using any kind of realistic data that you've anonymized at least the email addresses, and if you were dealing with European citizens or anyone who's got the legal, making sure that you're fully compliant with it, or HIPAA if it's medical. And then the other thing would be getting a realistic sampling, because too often we're looking at data which has been sanitized, so therefore it becomes too simple. Like there's no foreign characters, there's no very long names or weird things in it. So getting realistic and safe and sanitized is, to me, often the hardest part.
I do a lot of work around our company is a marketing company, so we do a lot of data. We've got customer databases and CRM applications with thousands and millions of records. And when we start looking at how we're going to test that, it's about, do I have the right amount of volume? And are the records set up correctly? We get into a lot of issues with testing where we've got data there. Data is there, but do I have the scenarios that I need where it's this type of data or this type of address or this type of customer information or this type of profile where I don't mask or modify, to Adam's point, to a point where the data doesn't look like what data would look like in production. You have to keep the structure of what you want. Make sure you've got those scenarios. And then the biggest thing, I think, again, to Adam's point here on the security, privacy is a big deal. We've got the CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act. It's traveling across the world, and other countries, other states are going to be doing this soon. I'm sure California just set the pace. And people want privacy. They don't want their PII information anywhere, and they want to be out of databases. So if you're testing, you definitely want to make sure you're masking the data and you have a masking process, whether you're using a really high-powered tool, which is great tools, but some are very expensive, or you build your own scripting to mask it. I can have my name and Adam's address, in your phone, but I can't have all of that together. So we have to figure out how to mask that effectively.
Right, and we're coming up on our last question. It's from Amy Jo from Chicago, and she asks,
hello,
what are the top 3 to 5 core competencies a leader needs today?
Okay. I listened to a talk by Amy Jo from STP because we went virtual, and she had a really good talk, and I resonate with her talks because she kind of started out in her leadership knowledge and learning of leadership the exact same way as me, looking at great leaders like Zig Ziglar, John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, and then expanded. And, she did the same thing. We went to a lot of their concerts, as we call them, for these motivational concerts. And I really liked her talk, and it really resonated with a lot of the things that I believe in from a leadership perspective. And that is one thing I learned a long time ago by one of the leaders that I had in the organization was he simply changed one word, and that is, I was working for him. And I was working for him, but he would not say, when I went to a meeting, the first meeting I ever went with him, the executive level, and he said, this is Mike, he works with me. The one simple change from for to with, he works with me, changed it, and made me feel like I'm part of his team instead of I'm his, his underling, and I've done that. I've tried to really not use the word for. So if I say, hey, this is my team, this is X, they work with me, Y works with me, you can see people behaving differently just for that one simple change. Because if you say they work for me, it sounds like, you're pushing down work for them and they're doing it for you. But that one simple word, that's one aspect. Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. I think really being a core competency with the leader is just being compassionate and understanding when you need to be there, when you need to push, when you need to step back and let them be empowered to do the job. A lot of leaders and a lot of managers really struggle with that. How far do I step in, to where I get into micromanaging, and how far do I step away where I'm not even managing or leading at all? And I think that's a big one. We talked about understanding what motivates people. I think that's really critical. Understanding what makes people happy. Trying to build a bond with them as you work with them, and understanding their lives. They have a life outside of work. They spend a third of their life working, but what are the things that they do? What do they like? What movies do they like? What shows do they like? What sports do they like?
Right.
You can build a bond with someone if we both like the same sports team, or we both like the same TV show or the same movie. It's crazy, but it works. And I had one more. Was I worked with a VP once that used fear to show his leadership. He'd bring everybody in the room and he would yell at me. He'd bring everybody in the room and yell at this other manager. And it's more about, ridicule you, and you had to go into work every day. Am I going to be the one that gets yelled at today? And you can't give them fear. You have to give them courage. So I think the note there is give them courage, not fear. And really, help the team be courageous, make them feel empowered to come to the meeting with ideas and suggestions. And that if they make a suggestion and you're leading a group of folks, that you're not going to say, well, that's stupid. That's not right. It's not working. Always listen, and, if it's not a great idea, you can kindly, and gently tell them it's not a good idea, but you don't have to push them down. And don't dwell in politics. I think politics is a big deal, getting caught up in politics. I really think one of my next books that's coming out is going to talk about the politics of the work environment, and how do you handle the different types of personalities that you have, and people trying to get to the top at all means versus people that are just trying to do something good for you and the company. So you have to figure out who's playing the game the right way.
Interesting.
Yeah, leadership is a topic for me that, I echo a lot of Mike's thoughts, is that as a leader, you're sort of a servant leader, which I know Mike's talked about a lot in a lot of his talks. And some of the organizations that I've learned a lot from, one was when I used to work at a company called Sapient, and they were an IT consulting firm, and they put a lot of store in leadership. They would send people away for offsites for days just to learn leadership, and really invested in that, which was very admirable. And I've got some lessons that I'm going to share about that. And the second organization was actually the United States Marine Corps. I worked for them as they were a client of mine when I was at Sapient for about 5 or 6 years, when I first came to the Washington D.C. area. And they have a very strong ethos around leadership. So a couple of things that I've learned from them would be, one is that as a leader, you want to set the vision. And in the Marine Corps, they set a vision by, here's the objective. The classic is capture the hill. But you don't want to tell someone how to do it. The most disempowering thing is if someone spells out to you, here are the 10 steps to do something, micromanaging them and giving them unnecessary structure. People have initiative. They will find things to do that you've never thought of. If you tell them what your objective is, the commander's intent, and give them the freedom to do something, obviously you may have to provide the box, because there's a box they may have to operate in. Here's the box. Here's the objective. I don't care how you do it, as long as it's not illegal or immoral. Go do it. And they'll come back with ideas you haven't thought of. Whereas so many people I've seen will be like, here's the 20-step process, and if you deviate from that process, I'm going to be unhappy with the result. And that's the wrong way. So I think the first thing is set the vision and give people the space to experiment safely, knowing that you're not going to criticize them. I was also a Boy Scout leader. So in the Boy Scouts, the second thing I would mention is as a Boy Scout leader, particularly in the Boy Scouts rather than the Cub Scouts, you don't tell the boys what to do. You actually encourage them to fail safely. That's the motto of scouting, fail safely. So as long as what you're going to do is not going to hurt anyone in any fashion, you want people to try things out, even if you know or think you know, and maybe you're wrong sometimes, that you're going to do this thing. This idea is crazy that you're thinking about. It's got 99% chance of failure. Well, maybe that 1% chance happens. But even if it does fail and you were right, they will have learned so much, and they will appreciate the fact they got the opportunity, and they will learn so much more by doing that than if you just told them it's not going to work. And in many cases, you will be surprised. So I think, set the vision, the freedom to make mistakes without you criticizing them or firing them or demoting them or humiliating them, whatever it is really important. And then the third thing would be you have to set an example. We call it modeling the way. You have to be able to do it. If you're going to tell people we're in trouble and we're going to do these things, you need to live that yourself. Or if we're going to go to a conference and we're going to pack up, Bluetooth speakers, and we've got 200 speakers to unbox them with the team. Don't just go away, let them do the unboxing, as you remember. And actually, as a leader, I think it's always important, find some grunt work that you almost deliberately seek out, because if you do that and make a point of finding something that you know that people will not expect you to do as a leader, you're going to win so much respect from them. And they won't see you above. They won't see you being above them. And it goes back to what Mike said about I work with them, not I work for them. When you see someone doing some relatively mindless task, it shows that we're all in this together, and you can't your words don't count. It's your deeds that will count. So talk sheep.
One thing that Mike has mentioned previously was finding leadership in all kinds of places. I would like for him to make that point again, because I think this is a very relevant point to this conversation. Please, I don't want to paraphrase you. You're here.
No, that's great. So yes, there is a book by John Maxwell called The 360-Degree Leader, and the one thing that Maxwell calls out, and we all know, but it's good to hear someone call it out the way he does, is that you can lead from all areas within the organization. Leadership is not about a title. Leadership is not about a position. It's about, how do you take care of the team that you're responsible for? And so, you can lead to your peers, you can affect and really motivate your peers and push them. You can lead your team. Of course, that's part of your job as a leader, but then you can also lead upward. And I think in the testing role, in the development role, and all of IT, being able to lead upward into the executive team, who may or may not have that detailed, as the higher you get up, they understand what's the deliverable, they understand what's the ROI, they understand what we're doing. But for you to be able to explain to them, what does this mean, what we're doing right here, and being able to lead upward and say, hey, I really think we need to do this, and being able to influence, you can influence your peers, people that's working for you and with you, and then people that are supporting you. Because if you can get that executive support for your vision, you're doing really good things.
Absolutely.
All right, I think this is it. I don't have any more questions. I would like to open up for anyone who is here. I don't think we have any more questions coming in live. So I wanted to give another shout out to Mike's book. It is called Drive-Through is Not Always Faster. It is available on his website. I will write it down on screen. That will be provided. And I wanted to tell our viewers that we are having another session of Tipsy Testing. It's coming up on Friday the 10th of April, and it will have two guests. It will be Adam Sandman, and it will be Jeffery Payne of Coveros. And with this, we are done. And I would like to thank you guys again, and have a very, very good night. And stay safe.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, guys.